All right. My name is Iris Sullivan Dare, and I'm here with the beautiful Ginger Edwards. And this is the Nurture Podcast. And this is where we explore that riparian zone between what is and what is possible.
Mhm.
And and also kind of dreaming forward into the world that we can co-create, like not just us, I mean, the collective us, including you that's listening right now.
Nice. Yeah. Welcome back, Iris. We took a little break. We both had adventures, went off and had little adventures, and now we are
Mm,
back on the podcast.
yeah.
So, what are you nurturing right now?
I am nurturing rest and recovery,
Hmm
which is something historically I have not done with much grace. So I'm exploring trying to be more gracious about rest and recovery
Mm-hmm.
and feeling really proud of myself because anticipating this week in May when it was my birthday, I decided to be proactive and kind of tackle this big deep clean, which we talked about for my studio because this is open studio week. And I knew that I was going to be teaching 2 weeks back to back. And I'm like, there's no way I can get prepped for it. And so I need to do that now in May. And that was such a good decision adult me
Mm,
made. And,
I love
and
that. I love it when your present self was like, thank you, past self, for
yes.
considering your future self. And now you're in it, that future self, and you did it. And it's like, oh, you set me up so well. I think that has got to be one of the best feelings of adulting. You know
Mm,
what I mean? Because we often think of adulting as like paying bills and just drudgery. But I really think one of the best adulting skills you can have is helping out your future self. Like,
yes.
setting her up for success. Like, I'm going to do the thing now. So, exactly what you just said. Like, when you come back exhausted from teaching for a week, the studio is clean and you could just roll into the opens. I mean, that's so high five.
High
High five
five.
on that. I remember when our mutual friend Britt Bowles told me a story that she had like had this huge piece of art she was going to hang in a hotel, and she was, and she had given herself like these extra 2 weeks to hang the thing up in her studio and just look at it and like
Mm.
fine tune it. Like, so her, helping herself be like, I'm booking in 2 weeks after I think it's going to be done to just hang it and observe it and then fine tune it, all the little details. And I couldn't have given someone like a bigger high five. I'm like, that's amazing. Like, I don't think I've ever been able to do that. Like, I've been able to meet deadlines, but to actually give yourself intentionally
Yes.
know that when I'm done, I want to really do this right. Like, I really want that time to observe it. So that's another example of just like, I'm so proud of my friends that, that tell me those stories. Like, I don't know, this like this ups, like even when you said that, I just felt in my body. I'm like, oh, Iris, that's so good. Good for you. It's so nurturing
Right. And it's
to
like, right.
do.
Yeah, totally.
Ah,
And yeah, so, and you also just went on a big adventure,
why did Oregon Country Fair?
which is a big adventure
Yeah,
always.
my new hat that I'm wearing. Those of you on YouTube can see my new cool new hat. It's always a big adventure. Yeah. And speaking of recovery time, yeah, at 50, going to Country Fair is a little different. I've been going there, I think it's like almost 20 years now. This is probably my 16th year doing a booth there. And for those of you who don't know, Country Fair is amazing, but like basically the party for the public ends at 7 o'clock. And then they clear everybody out. And then the party for the inside crew, which is about half the population of the festival, begins, and so they go all night. And so when you're working the fair, you're like, oh, well, I'm just gonna work my booth during the day and then I'm gonna get ready because as soon as the sunset hits, all the stages light up again and it goes. And so, it's like a magical fairyland in the dark. You wander around and there's just like people doing banjo, and then you walk 10 feet and someone's reading poetry, and or someone's on a trapeze, or someone's a DJing in the woods with a bunch of glowing mushroom people hats dancing around. It's just like insane, so you can't stop. Like, the FOMO is so bad. You just have to keep going because you're like, and then there's like a thing that looks like a ship, but that's serving macaroni and cheese out of the side of it. And you're just like, I just can't stop playing in this huge playground that they've set up, right? So 4 a.m. rolls around and you're like, okay, well, I really need to
You're
go
gonna
to
go to
bed.
sleep because I'm gonna
And
have
I have
to
to
see
get
the
up.
public.
Yeah, because you have to get up, like, I had to get the hot water ready. I have a tea thing. So I would get up in like 4 hours and get stuff ready. And so, yeah, I did that for 3 nights. I was like up to 4 a.m. and got 4 hours of sleep and then got up, and then it's all very extroverted. I mean, the whole thing is like people, 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 people experience. Your brain is exploding because you're just having so many artistic experiences, which is wonderful. But then I came home. And yeah, the recovery time. That's when you feel like I was able to do it. I was like having a great in it. I was like, yes, this is amazing. I'm having so much fun. And I was able to maintain that. And then as soon as I got home, I was like, oh my God, I'm blown. Like I couldn't do, it
Yeah.
took me a full week to like,
Uh,
I just went into deep rest and like putter mode. But I will say that I did not plan anything for that entire week. Like I really didn't have anything on my schedule for that week, knowing that I was going to roll back from country fair and I used to give myself a day. Now I give myself like a solid week if I can manage it, just to basically, there's things I do, but it's like so minimal, like nothing urgent, nothing that demands my attention. So yes, I'm with you on the recovery train. And I do think that's where your age shows up. I think it's in the recovery time. And so maybe that's the adulting, is like you get better at understanding what your recovery times are, or like what you need, and you can plan for it. Like it's a good skill.
It's like accepting what is. Like that's, like I think the yeah, and the irony is that when I was younger, it didn't even occur to me.
No, you didn't need to do that. You don't need it.
I didn't even, I just thought,
No.
I'm an Energizer bunny. I can just do
Yeah.
this
Oh my gosh,
nonstop.
yeah.
And I was, like now I look back and it's like, oh my God, I was such a workaholic adrenaline junkie,
Yes,
like
absolutely.
I
Mhm.
told, and the thing that was interesting is I taught at Sitka this week, and I had two classes scheduled. One was a 1 day class and it didn't go. And it was
Mhm.
at the end of my other class. So they're like, there's not another class in here. So you can take your time getting all your stuff out. Usually you have like an hour and a half at the end
Oh
of your
wow.
class to get everything moved to a different location. And so I was like, oh, anyway, I'm not going to go into like, I was like, oh, I'll lake all these dye baths and blah, blah, blah. But like, I, I realized I was like, I called Joe up. It's pretty early in the morning. And I'm like, I have the whole day to putter in this beautiful space. Right. So I was talking to Joe, and it's like, I don't know, it's in the morning. And then I'm like, oh, I got to go bring this outside and put it in the compost, some leftover dye bath stuff. And so I'm like, I'll be right back. So I just set the phone on the table. And I went outside and I dumped the compost, and I came back in, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do this. And then like literally like 5 minutes later, I'm like, oh wait, I was talking to him on the phone. And he's like another side of the room, like, face down, like there's no way for him to get my attention. My hearing's shot.
Right.
And
Was
so
he still on the phone?
and I went over there, and he's like, he was just doing what he was doing. He had the phone
Oh,
on, and
yeah.
he's like, I was getting ready to hang up, but
He
he's
loves
like,
you
I
so
could.
much.
And so, anyway, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, like you've heard this, like when pilots are at like high elevation, and if they have something happens, and then their oxygen gets low for whatever reason, they're not aware that
Mhm.
they're going to pass out, like
Right.
because they're breathing but they're not getting, anyway, there's this like thing where like you are not functioning. I was not functioning, but I thought I was functioning. And then it was like, oh my God, like I am so not functioning. And so I'm like,
Mhm.
what, I think I'm gonna go back and climb in bed for a little while and come back later.
Yeah, man.
But
That's
anyway,
good self-awareness, Iris.
I know, but it was just like, oh my God. Like I just like
Mhm.
I walked outside and I came back in, I completely forgot what
That's hilarious. Well, I mean, I can still relate to that. And so, but I don't even need an excuse of having taught a like week-long class. I'm like, I do that just in general, wander around. I'm like, oh yeah, I was making tea. It's all burned now. Like the chai pot is completely blackened because
Oh,
I wandered into the garden and then started to do whatever,
yeah.
completely unaware that I was
But
heating up
I
tea.
I think that if I have taught classes back to back like that, and I think that if I had to stay on,
Oh yeah,
I
totally.
would have been in a different mental state. It was kind of like once like that night, I'm like, phew, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different
That's it.
mental state.
That's
And then
it.
it's
Like during the fair, I could stay in it. Like I was fine. I was functioning. I was like, and I was actually not even tired. I was like, operating on very little sleep, and I'm just like rolling. And then as soon as I got home, it was like, all right, like the body is like, okay, now, you know, go down. And it was a hard go down. I was surprised at how long it took to be like, whoa, okay, like this has been 3 or 4 days, and I'm still dragging myself around. And I will say, like this little Capricorn double full moon thing that we
oh
just,
my gosh. Woo!
whoa, yeah. I mean, all my astrological people out there, what a whammy that was. It was just everybody I've talked to was like, that was a rough little double Capricorn sandwich we just got through. So I felt that for sure. And
Oh, for sure.
yeah, so it was just like I don't know. Well, the whole political scene was going crazy, but also just, yeah, energetically, it was like chickens coming home to roost moment or something. Like there was just like things you had had to deal with stuff, it was like, now or never kind of moment of just taking care of some things that, yeah, and also just
Yeah.
feeling exhausted. Maybe it was just like, yeah, like that energy had to catch up too, of like, if we haven't been taking rest, if you needed to recover from some other things, I was feeling it right then. It was like a whole week of just like feeling that um,
Yeah. I'm
comeuppance.
what's that? The comeuppance.
The
Why am I
comeuppance.
like,
I don't know. You have headphones on.
I have headphones. It's not going to help. We were somewhere recently, and we're talking to our neighbor out in front of our house like the other day, and his wife, my neighbor has an electric car, and you know how when it's going through a neighborhood, it makes some sound apparently, but that sound is beyond my hearing range now because I am having some hearing loss. And so like I hear Joe say, "Oh, here comes Lindsay." And I'm like, "What?" And then like and Colin's like, "Oh, here she comes." And like there's no car visible.
Right, right.
And it was like which leads me to this other thing of we don't know what we're not perceiving.
Yes, that's very true.
Right. And
Yep.
so like, and it's really interesting these times we live in. Because oh my God, actually, I realize what I want to talk about now. It's
Okay.
exactly this. Have we talked about the Tower of Babel?
Sure.
Be-
Let's do it. Oh, have
Okay.
we talked about it? No,
Yeah,
I
have we
don't know.
talked about this idea?
No,
Okay.
go for it.
So I think that the whole idea of the Tower of Babel, for those who didn't have any religious upbringing, is that, and this is my very shallow understanding because I only went to catechism for a very short time because my family was imploding. So I just got the like Mother Mary is like lots of love and like, I'm like, cool. I have a very, very poor. And then I read the entire Bible when I was in sixth grade, the summer of sixth grade. We talked about that. We did
Yep.
talk about that. And how, so anyway, so I'm not a religious scholar, clearly, but my understanding of the Tower of Babel idea is that God got mad because people were, I don't know, organizing or something, or loving whoever they wanted to love, some sort of like big sin like that. And so then they were going to build a tower to God because they're like, I don't know. Anyway, so then God's like smites them with chaos and makes everyone that's working together on this project to get closer to God. Suddenly everyone's speaking a different language and they can't understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, I don't know. It's like, anyway, that's it's not my kind of God, but seems to me that this week teaching, I had this really interesting thing where I had about literally half my class was super into the science of what I was doing. And half the class was kind of like, whoa, this is really uncomfortable. And the half that was super into it was like asking all these questions. And we're like, and the other half was like, some of them were like, I'm just going to check back in when we're doing something that I understand. And I'm just going to work on my thing. And I'm like, cool. They had really good boundaries and really good like ability to tell me that. One person was kind of disgruntled. And in the checkout, she was like, this was the one I thought I was getting into. And when we talked about during the closing round, um, that person said that, and another person was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. This is exactly what I thought I was getting into when I read the description." And so then the conversation between the classmates, I mean, we were all at a big round table, was, "What did you get out of the description?" And everyone had gotten something different out of the
Interesting.
description. And it was just like really, so like it was a very interesting experience for me because I was thinking, I'm not for every student.
Yeah.
Just like I don't want to date every human I see. Like,
Okay.
it's like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like not everybody's for everybody. That's just the way
But
it
what does this
is.
have to do with the Tower of Babel in the
Well,
Bible?
what I'm thinking is, well, that whole concept of the Tower of Babel, of people can be having the exact same experience
Ah,
and they
okay.
think that they're talking to each other, but they're actually talking across each other,
Hmm.
or like they don't. But the thing is that I think that we are living in the Tower of Babel, but the thing is that we think that we're talking the same language. We think that we're communicating, but
Uh,
it's like whoosh.
yeah, yeah.
That's and it's that blind spot thing of like I couldn't hear the car. It didn't exist for me until I could see it,
Right.
and but they could hear it. But like
Mhm.
people have this thing where they're experiencing a thing and somebody else is not experiencing it. It's like, what are you talking about? That doesn't exist.
Yeah, and to just double down on that, which is very true, if you don't believe in something, like your brain will literally filter it out. Like our visual range, like there could be people who see a same, like they've done so many studies where people see the same crime scene, right? Like they replay it for people.
Okay.
Yeah, they put people in a room and they redo the whole thing exactly the same, and everybody will come back and say, they saw something different. And they realize that, our beliefs in our brain are so strong, they actually are filling in most of what we see, because the optics of what we actually receive through the optic nerve aren't, like, it's all coming at us so fast. Our brain can't process that much information that quickly for us. So basically, it's like it'll take some of it and then kind of fill in the rest of the data from what it's already known. Like you're driving down a street, you're seeing some of the street, but really you're seeing a memory of that street. And so only if
Mhm.
you're on like a completely different street and you've never been there is your brain fully attuned to being like, okay, what's going on? But if you're driving down a street that you've driven down, you're basically just running on autopilot. Your brain's just like, yeah,
Yes.
we know where you are. But your optic nerve is kind of not doing that much unless something big vulture like hits your car or something, then it's like new information. So yeah, like like we're getting into some deep stuff here, but like reality is subjective, right? Like we only really see what we believe is like
Possible.
possible. Yeah, and our brain can only pull information from what we've known. So if we've never seen it before, like we can filter things out. Like people can filter out things that don't, you know, make sense to them. Like they can see something really weird, like a ghost or a UFO, or even like just people will say something that they're like, "Oh, I really thought you were a jerk," but they say something nice, and it's kind of like that doesn't compute. So your brain just kind of filters that comment out. Like, no, no, he's a jerk. He couldn't have actually like he couldn't have been sincere and said something nice in that moment. That's not him. So you just like
Right.
dismiss that part. And you kind of go back to your filter that your brain likes, which is like he's a jerk. We know that. We're done. We don't have to add any information. Move on. So we form these like beliefs about things in our lives fairly early too. And then because we have these things, we tend to reinforce them, you know? Like
Right.
so it's just gets reinforced. And yeah, so I guess yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's very powerful, that idea that we think we're experiencing the same things and we're all actually we have very different filters based on who we are and what we believe and what we think and how we were raised. And I don't know, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, and just
Okay.
that like we're unknowingly living in, I don't know, it's like the whole like they're in their own private Idaho, right? Like people
Oh
are in
yeah.
their own perception, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like I don't know, it just feels like the whole thing of like setting the phone down and not hearing the car
Mm,
as a follow up to having that conversation where
right.
there's a whole there's, a classroom full of people that all picked up something different from the same 50-word description.
Yeah, because they're filtering it for what is
Mhm.
meaningful to them. Like
And
they're reading it paragraph and they're like, ooh, that part, that's why I'm signing up. And it's so interesting as you write that, you don't know
yes, right.
which of those words are going to hit 50 different people different ways. Like, you know, somebody might see, yeah, like that's what's so interesting about writing too. It's like we don't know. We're choosing words. We don't know what they mean to other people. It's like we just put our art out there. Like you really can't control how people are gonna consume it or understand it or
And
what they're
it's
gonna do
like,
with it.
and like one of the people was saying, well, maybe you should have had a disclaimer or something about there's going to be the science part of it. But if they had read my bio, it talks explicitly about how I bring science and story to
Mhm.
the topic. Like it's kind of my MO. So
Yeah.
so it's like it's not even about, like, I think crafting it as clearly as possible is really your job if you're presenting something for people,
Mhm.
and offer. And then you have to let it go
You
because
do.
you have no idea what they're going to pick up. And I was thinking about, like, when how we make decisions and how often it actually has little to nothing to do with the description, or the, like I feel like, like you're, like, if you ever go, like, something is attractive to you, it's attractive to you before you have any information, and then you're like, oh, I
Mhm.
you pick that up and I'm going to look at it closer. But the attraction
Yeah.
to a person, the object, the event, that attraction happens before you have any concrete information about it, it seems to me.
Yeah. And I think it's very personal and I think it's always emotional.
Yes.
Like I know from studying marketing, because I've done that for a while. Like, yeah, when we buy from emotion, 100%. Like we pick up things, we're attracted to certain teachers or, whatever. We go to events because of an emotion. And, everybody's different. So depending on how you present something, like it's going to create different emotional states in different people. Like a perfect example of, you said, like science and story. Somebody could read that sentence and just hear story and be like, ooh, I like stories.
Ah,
And then science
yes.
just like skip right over that. Like, whatever, I don't care about that. Like, that's not, it doesn't resonate. And some other people would be like, ooh, it's just science, and skip over the story part. That's what they're
Yes.
focused on. Right. So, it's just whatever appeals to you. And that's an emotional reaction. And then your brain deletes or fills in what it wants to keep that emotional, whatever connection that to buy that class. Right. I mean, yeah, it's fascinating, really is. I mean, but it is definitely a subjective reality, which is really trippy to start to think about. Like you could be in the same room experiencing the same thing with people and you think everyone's having the same experience. They're
But they're
not. Like,
absolutely not.
yeah, like
Yeah.
Joe's here in the car, you're not. Like he's having a different experience, even though you guys stand in the exact same spot. His brain is thinking something that you haven't even heard the sound yet. So you're not even, that thought can't occur to you yet because nothing's
It's
stimulated
right.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were literally, like, sitting on the steps next to each other, touching. Like, so,
Yeah.
like we
So think
couldn't.
of like somebody on their phone reading the news on their phone versus someone sitting right there doing like not reading the news. You know what I mean? Like their brains are going crazy with all new information and like their emotions are being stimulated. And the person next to them literally inches away is like, doo, 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 like watching birds or like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's how different we can be based on, because now we have the ability to take this input and like from the world, the
Yes.
entire
Yes.
world, and put it in our palm and choose what we want to. And then you have algorithms, right? And those are designed to, based on your emotional, they're so cleverly designed to track and feed us what we're emotionally already tuned into. So they start feeding us more and more and more of it. So again, it's a reinforcing behavior. They understand how our chemistry and our brains work. So they just work with it. They're like, oh, you like that? Here's some more. And then here's some things opposite just to keep you interested. And, and so we get further down our track of reality. It's not
Correct. And
challenged. Yeah.
even more siloed.
Exactly. More subjective reality. Like now everything I'm looking at that I think is news, it's actually been handpicked for me based on what I've already stopped and looked at before. So we're not even sitting in the same room. And like when we were growing up, you'd watch TV, like ABC News would come on the television set, and literally everybody in America was kind of watching the same 3 news networks report similar news, right? That's not what's happening anymore. We are getting like curated feeds to provoke an emotional response in us to stay on the social media platform long enough to see a certain amount of ads. I mean, it's crazy. So they know,
yeah.
you know, but it's actually really telling of like how we're designed. So, which is going back to like this Tower of Babel. Like we all are basically looking for whatever soothes and stimulates our own personal nervous systems. And now computers are like, we can do that.
You
We
know,
know exactly what does that.
so here's the thing that's been happening that I was, because I'm in menopause ish, you know, like I'm halfway through my year, so I'm guessing I'm on, you know, like I've been at perimenopause for a number of years now, so I think I'm probably about halfway to like whatever officially.
Mm.
But I've been really noticing my emotional transparency or something like uh like more like I've been feeling my emotions really strongly like
Mm.
this in the last months. And like I've been noticing like when I'm tired, like sometimes beauty is just painful because
Mm.
it's just so much. Like if I'm feeling something really like last night, or that was that this morning. Anyway, there was a Western tanager in
Mm.
our Sitka spruce tree, and it was singing, and Joe heard it and got me outside. And so we're out there, and I have this thing for Western tanagers, but like it was just like I just started weeping, you know, because it was just
Mm.
so beautiful. And like I couldn't see it because it was up too high from where we were, but I could hear it. And I know, you know, I'm like there, I could feel them, you know. So like, but but I was thinking about like right now I feel just really broken open
Mm.
since we became empty nesters. Like this, you know, that's kind of coincided. So like, and I think about what you're saying about like how we're drawn. It's like our emotions are the magnet. But
Mm.
what happens when your emotions are really clenched down and shut down?
Mm.
What is drawing you to what you're drawn to? You know, like if you're like, right, does that make sense? Like I feel like I'm right now, I'm like just feeling in a, like a really high level, like not like
Mm.
high level, like evolved, but just like the burners turned up really high, kind of high.
Mm.
And and it's like you think about, I'm like, how do people, everything is, nature is so unbelievably beautiful. It's so distracting. Like how can you even like how can we have time for anything else
Right.
when there's Western tanagers exist in the woods next to my house? Like, or like there's a mama deer and
Mm.
her 2 babies, and like I'm having all these interactions with these deer, and like it's like seriously, it's like how yeah, it's
I know, but that's such a perfect example of like how you're tuned into a frequency that so many people are just completely oblivious. Like if you don't know what a Western tanager is, it's I bet you people don't even hear it. Like they don't, it's just a sound. Maybe but it doesn't compute, you know? It's like that's just a bird somewhere. Maybe they didn't even hear it at all. Maybe they're just tuned into something else that they
they're
do
hearing
understand.
the
Yeah.
log trucks on the
Yeah,
highway.
log trucks or like, the radio or whatever, but I think that's such a perfect example of like one of the ways that humanity has shifted our focus towards the what we make, what we create as real, and nature
Mm,
becomes like a backdrop. And
mm.
yet, if you are living a lifestyle like you do, where you're an artist and you're tuned into the natural world, and that's where you draw your inspiration, you're like actually like emotionally connecting to these things to like draw your own creative flow from. That's a unique position. Like that's probably a very small percentage, I would say, of Americans that you're your attention is outward, like into that zone, and even for myself, I would say like I'm not in that zone. I mean, it'd have to be like a special moment when I was standing on my deck, really focused on birds to even like, otherwise I'm just thinking about whatever. And I'm like, I can't. So that's such a beautiful example of how ecstatic present moment connection awareness
Mhm.
can be and especially with nature, because it is like a total psychedelic trip out there. I mean, if
Yes.
we pause for a moment and like look at anything going on this planet closely enough, it is wild, like beyond anything that we could create. That's the thing, is like
Yeah.
nothing could create. I was on the bay yesterday just taking a walk, and I was very overwhelmed and spun out. I got like people painting my house. It was like money stuff. It's just a lot going on. And I was very overwhelmed. So I was walking and I realized I had my podcast in my ears. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I have to take this podcast out. Like I can't, I can't have more information right now, even though it's what I usually do when I walk my dog. So I just got really quiet, just hearing the water and the bay and the wind. And and then I started looking at things like, and like the color of the seaweed just plastered to the sand, and how like iridescent, weirdly emerald green shiny it was, and how when you picked it up there was like a bazillion little creepy sand fleas jumping around underneath it, and how cool
Yeah.
they were. And then I started playing, I thought of you actually. I started playing by just taking this old driftwood log that was really cool looking and just putting seaweed on it in different parts and just kind of making art, because it was really grounding for me. Like it was just like, I'm just in the present moment. I'm just playing in nature. And I did it for, like 10 minutes. Like I felt myself calming down. I
Mm-hmm.
felt my whole nervous system just slowing down, and there was no purpose to what I was doing. I just was kind of delighting in how cool this natural stuff was. It's all just laying there. And if you just start playing with it a little bit, how interesting and cool. And like the more you pay attention, the weirder it gets. Like, yeah, everything about that, all these little muscles that were growing on the log. And like, I don't know, it was just fascinating. So yes, I agree. I think that's one of the remedies for what we're going through as humans with this crazy industrialization moment and technology moment, is to like, yeah, unplug for any amount of time you need and
And
tune
it's
into
and it's
the
and it's it is everywhere. I mean, like, I think I have a unfair advantage of having grown up kind of feral out in the country, and like spending on like my whole childhood I spent outside, right? So that's kind of like, I feel like that was that's such an advantage. That's such a privilege. But like, I've lived in big industrial cities and I've traveled to big industrial cities. And the thing is that there is nature there. Like, there are plants I know coming up through cracks in the
Mm.
sidewalk. All these herbal healing medicinal plants are popping up in sidewalk cracks and in empty lots. And there's like, even if it's squirrels and pigeons, like
Mm.
squirrels and pigeons are kind of astounding, like, but
Yeah.
like, I think that I don't know. It feels um like, was in that Terry Pratchett, he talks about opening your eyes and then opening your eyes again,
Mm.
and to see what's, like, in what you were saying about how it's like this selective thing, like we're like, if you get a new car, suddenly every car on the road is a yellow Hyundai or whatever
Totally.
kind
Yeah.
they have.
Hmm.
So like once you really see some plant, suddenly it becomes visible. It was
Hmm.
told, just like her car, like I couldn't hear it, didn't exist for me, and that won't ever, because I don't have that hearing range anymore. But I guess if I get a hearing aids, maybe that will fix it. I don't know. But you
But
know what I
think about
mean?
if you were a dog, like how much, like we don't
Right.
experience, we are not, we think we're on our street and we're experiencing life. No, my dog next to me is hearing way more
And smelling
information
so
and
much stuff.
smelling so much. And like, yeah, I mean, we're just getting a little tiny piece of the channel, and that channel is being filtered through our pre-existing thoughts and notions about
Yes.
what's going on. And it's being filtered through our attention. So we're not paying attention to. And so it's all like, think if you can reduce that, it's probably like less than 1% of actual perceived reality is going on. We're paying attention to a very specific thing, and it's being filtered very heavily by our thoughts and belief systems. And we're humans, so we only have so much perception to begin with
Right.
based on our like physical makeup. So yeah, like that Western tanager in that tree is having a completely different ecstatic experience than you are on the
Yes.
ground listening to it. It's up there having a totally different reality of sky and sea
And the
and
canopy.
wind and, you know, other sounds and everything about its inner being of migration or whatever is going through. I mean, it's so much information that you'll never understand about magnetic poles of the ley lines of the
Ah,
earth and
right,
how they
right,
travel. I mean,
right,
God knows what we know. That's information that they have that we don't have.
right.
It's always really, really, and I'm actually listening to this nomadic traveling podcast about this woman or book actually on tape, and she's just traveling the world and she's staying in all these indigenous villages and how she's just like every time she enters into a new, you know, reality of these humans and like what
Mhm.
they pay attention to and their customs and traditions and you know it's and she how it takes her a while like at first she gets there and everybody runs away from her and everyone's you know freaks out and no one talks to her and then after a month you know it starts to settle in and her perception changes all of a sudden she knows enough language she knows whose kids are whose
Mm.
she's wearing a traditional skirt now they see her now they're not filtering her out they're filtering her as one of them because she's wearing the colors of the village it's fascinating I mean to just to feel like how yeah how we relate you know she wasn't even real she was like a ghost to them until she put regular like real clothes on basically like she wasn't
Ah,
wearing real clothes she was wearing pants they're like we don't even it does not compute you know like who you are just scary they just run away from her and so yeah I think it's I don't know where I'm going with that story but it's fascinating to me like how I guess the message would be if you're ever like really freaking out about something in your life just realize that like you're you're freaking out about something that's such a small piece of information and like one of the
right.
ways you can help yourself is either to ground I just had a really good coaching call this afternoon about grounding and actually I find that every single time I coach somebody it's a coaching for myself and I don't know if that's like why I love coaching so much or it's because human experience is so common like you know we just all
Yes,
are
yes.
basically have the same brain but every single time I'm like, oh my God, like I feel I have the exact same problem, the exact same thought. And I don't say that to my client, but like I'm understanding that the spirit is giving us both
Mm-hmm.
this exact coaching because I'm like, wow, that's just what I needed. And her whole thing was, yeah, like just getting super spun out and using food to ground herself, like eating, you know. And I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I do that too, you know. And how if we were both kind of like, well, what if we dropped into our body somatically and we're like, what is this feeling? And the feeling that was coming up was like, if I'm not taking care of people, if I'm not having a purpose, if I'm not working, if I'm not, then I don't even, why am I on the planet? Like
Mm.
maybe I don't even belong here. Like if I'm not, you know, proving that I belong here or something. And it was like a really jittery feeling and I was trying to be like, okay, we'll sit with that feeling. You know, we're coaching out. And all of a sudden, intuitively, I was like, can you just feel your feet right now? And like just
Mm.
ground into the earth. And as soon as she did it, she's like, oh, the feeling's gone. And I was like, what? Like we were like we were in this feeling. And she's like, yeah, it's just gone. Like it's not even there. It's not even a thing anymore. I just grounded and it immediately disappeared. And I was like, wow,
Wow.
that's so interesting. So what we discovered was that that was a sensation of being ungrounded. The sensation she was
Ah,
describing was not being connected to the not feeling connected to the planet. Like she was obviously sitting on her chair and having her feet on the ground, but she was not intentionalizing it. Her
yes,
attention was
yes.
on everything that she was doing wrong or the way, you know what I mean? Her attention was out there. And as soon as she shifted her attention to just her feet and below her feet, like just a little bit, she knows how to ground, you know, I'm like, just,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
just sink in immediately fixed it. And she's like, yeah, it wasn't, and it was so gone that she was like, it's not even a thing. Like I can't even access it anymore. Like it's just not there. And it was a huge problem when we got on the call. And it was fascinating to me. And I was like, wow, that is so interesting because I feel like so much of like the loops in our head and all these problems that we're always just running around trying to fix could just be what we're talking about. It's like we've just shift our attention back to our presence on the planet and know that that's enough. That's all we have to do. Like, we don't have to figure it out. We just have to be here.
Right,
We just have to
right.
feel that, because once we shift our attention to how that connection is there, it's like, it's not, there's no question that I matter or that I'm worthy or that I'm doing enough. It's like, oh, I'm just here.
And we
And
all make,
here is powerful. You know what I mean? The earth
Mhm.
is powerful and everything's, of course I matter. I'm here. I am breathing, I'm like the tanager is not worrying about whether it matters or not. It's just doing its thing. It's singing and it's making this huge impact on you, but it's not like worried about that.
And I think about like that power of feeling yourself as part of this bigger whole that is this planet and like the life on this planet. And it's like the problem I think is when you feel disconnected from it,
Mhm.
then we always talking about that, but it's like that's when you're really easy to control, right? That's when it's like the more, what is it that makes us feel grounded? It's
Mhm.
like spending time in nature, working with our hands in some sort of, like human scale thing,
Yep.
eating together, singing,
Mhm.
dancing,
Mhm. Yep.
wearing clothes that reinforce belonging, like all these things that like, so it's kind of like the cumulative effect of these, like, they talk about microaggressions and how horrible, like how impactful they are, even though they're individually they're all these really small things. It's like it's like the accumulation, and it's so heartening for me to hear you say she had this experience of like obviously she had had a practice at some point where she grounded, so
Mhm.
she'd practiced that so enough that she could ground in a
Yeah.
short amount of time. And then it's like, oh yeah, that's all like smoke and mirrors, all
Yep.
that stuff, all
Yep.
that. It's like it's like the carnival act.
Mhm. It's like, exactly. It's like the goggles, the filter or whatever. But it was a feeling in her body too, which I thought was interesting. Like it was a panicky feeling, like, what do I do? What do I do? And it's like, just ground. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I do. Done. And from there, from that place, all kinds of other thoughts were available to her and that were really powerful. Like, oh yeah, I'm enough. It was like, and then it was like the session, she was leading the session at that point. She was like, oh, yeah, I know this, I know this, I know this. And it was so powerful. And I was kind of blown away by it. And we're like, whoa. So I have another coach that used to say, when people get spun out, call your power back to you right now.
Mm.
That was another one I thought was really good, because it's the acknowledgement that your attention has gone somewhere to a system that that feels disempowering and panicky to you. And you've given your power to like a clock or, something that's
Hmm.
rushing you, a piece of technology, an email that you haven't, it's like, call your power back to you, which is very much like, I think, grounding. Like for me, if I called my power back, I'd probably have to close my eyes away from reality for a minute and feel my feet on the ground and say, okay, I call my power back to me. And in that moment, you are aware that you're a body connected to earth and that all this other stuff that you're worried about is just a filter that, and most of it is a societal filter that you've taken on to participate in the
Right.
pace that the
Right.
society wants you to roll at. And it's very dehumanizing, that filter. I mean, that pace and
Yes.
all of these push that we feel that we have to do this and do this and do this and keep going and pay this bill and pretty soon our lives become this problem to solve or to try to always trying to figure it out, always try to figure out how to make it work. And when it's not designed to work, I mean, it's not designed for us to actually figure out, make it work. It's designed for us to
Right.
just be struggling all the time. I mean,
Right. Right.
that's
Right.
what keeps us, like you said, very cleverly keeps us in a place of never enough, right? So we're buying and looking outside of ourselves for that. So I guess, I mean, yeah, I mean, when you're thinking about recovery time and then this other piece of grounding and being present, like maybe that's what we're really doing when we come back into this recovery times, is trying to reground because we've just done something very big. Usually what we've done is some kind of big extroverted thing, right?
Mhm.
Where we've connected to a lot of people. And often it's very beautiful and powerful,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
but that
totally.
regrounding, and I think if I'm not intentional about making that sacred time, like I am now taking this time to ground,
Mm.
it just turns into days of me puttering around in a day in like kind of a haze and kind of beating
Yes.
myself up that I'm not being productive.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Eh,
I do think that there is some magic in just
Making it.
saying, yeah, making like I'm gonna take 3 days of sacred grounding after this
Oh my
big,
gosh.
right? Doesn't that feel good?
Yes. Yes. I totally like my whole
I
body went,
know.
oh,
And it's so
oh,
simple, but that's the power for me of
yes.
intention. That's
Hmm.
what shifts it. We could be doing it. We could be like, for me, I sleep a lot. I probably eat a lot more. I'm grounding. Like I am doing it.
Eating
Your
so
body is
much
doing,
this
yeah,
week.
exactly. You're
I'm
eating.
like, I'm time for another snack. Time for
Exactly.
another some
Right.
protein.
So your body knows what to do. Your body's really wise. Somatically, we are doing it, but our brains are kind of like, I feel unfocused. I feel, like we're kind of have this other story going on. Like that's the pressure of we're not performing how we normally are. So I think this is part of like, for me, and I have this like reclaiming any part of priestess path, like it,
Yes.
which is making things sacred, which again is very much connected, calling your power back to you. And by priestess, I just mean like making your life sacred, like making these moments not, oh, I mean, even at the time, I'm correcting myself from what I said like 50 minutes ago, which was like, I'm old and I need more recovery time, to I am wise and I am taking 3 days of sacred grounding time because I
Hmm.
just expended a lot of energy into the universe. And like, that's so empowering. That's something you can gift your future self. Like, we're going to plan in my sacred grounding time. Like, how awesome does that sound? And then you can be like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean yeah, like, how do I ground? And for me, what I kind of stumbled into sitting on the beach and drawing in the sand was like, that was kind of like this gentle creativity outside moment that my body led me to. Wasn't planned. I was like, this would be nice. This would be a nice way to spend my time if I was in that process.
Before when we were getting packed to go down to Sitka, like I had taught at the kids camp the whole week before. And so then I had to like pivot and I hadn't gotten my packet done because of, just it's been a busy summer. So I had to like make my packet for the class. And then I'm like, okay, I have this amount of time to do it. And, and then our son was doing a study abroad. He's actually in the air right now, flying home, but he was doing a study abroad and he needed help with some train tickets and his airline ticket thing. There was a issue that he needed help with, and it took us 4 hours being like on a conference call with
Yeah.
him in Europe. And so it all worked out. It's all great. But it was like I didn't really have 4 hours. And so that meant like on Monday, I was like, and Joe, like super wisely, he's like, I'm like, I'm feeling so anxious. And he's like, and you're supposed to be there to check in
Mm.
at 4 o'clock. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna do that. And then he's like, why don't you just call? This is at 10 in the morning. And I had, and it, I had sent the packet to the printer at like 9. And I was like, trying to get all packed. And he's like, why don't we just call them and arrange for late check-in? And I was like, oh, that's so brilliant. And it felt great at 10 a.m. to say, we're not going to make the 4 o'clock deadline. Where can we get the key?
Hmm.
And I was like, I just felt like it was no big deal. Like
Right.
zero deal. Zero deal for them. Like I've
Yep.
been there multiple times. They know me well. It's like they're like, yeah, you don't need the check-in. Just like
Hmm.
here's where the key will be. And I just realized it's like these constraints we have
Yep.
about taking our needs. And so that was number one data point. And the other one was I was like eating some breakfast and I was like, okay, I'm still kind of tense. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have time to I didn't feel like I had time to like meditate and do time in front of my altar. What I'm like, but I'm going to light some incense from New Mexico. I'm going to light some incense because that will bring me back into myself and ground
Hmm.
me. even though I'm not gonna be
Right.
taking the time that I would normally take. And it totally worked. It felt like a
Yeah.
magic trick. And I'm like, why have I not been doing that all this time?
Yeah. I
Like,
love
like,
this. I want to just respond to yes, for sure. Yes. And I also want to say the power of knowing what you need and then articulating it in this really calm way. Like calling and being like, we need late check-in, And
versus like
and
apologizing profusely and
exactly. And there's something about, I think this is part of my little priestess speech too, but as we reclaim or priest, wherever, or that seems weird. Warlock, I don't know. Whatever the males want to call it. Their druid power. But like we reclaim our rights to say things like, I'm taking sacred grounding time. And like
yes, yes,
I
yes.
think you will find in the world that people will like, okay, like, because in a way you create your reality. Again, like if that's my reality, I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to do that. I just invented that I'm taking sacred grounding time for 3 days and I'm just like super calm and confident about it. People are like, okay, like nobody really, we think there's going to be this huge, like, but
Right, right,
actually,
right.
no, people are like, cool. Like, well, I don't understand that, but you seem pretty clear and calm about it. So you do that. And of course, neither one of us work for other, big corporations or anything. But I'm just saying, like in life in general, like if we state our needs and we really like, if we know our needs, that's one, and we
Yes,
honor them,
yes,
that's two, and then we can
yes,
communicate them,
yes.
that's
The
three.
three.
There is a very powerful mix in there that I think that we're afraid, that's a lot of process to get to even that point. But I find that it's magic. Like that's spell work. Like once you do that, it's not a problem. Like the universe accommodates.
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
like because people's reality, right? They adjust. They're like, oh, okay, like you're
I
that
mean,
way.
think about how often you've got plans with a friend or you've got, something you got to do. And it's like, oh gosh, I'm going to be late. And so if you just like, or like, oh gosh, I realize that's not going to work that day. If you like reach out and check in with that person, it's like, I swear to God, 9 times out of 10, absolutely 9.5 times out of 10, the other person's like, oh, thank God, I
Yep.
also need to adjust that.
Totally. Totally.
And it's
It's
like,
like you're picking up on a shared mutual, like I need more time or I need to move that. Or yeah, almost always that happens for me. I think I'm being a jerk by doing it. And the person's like, woof, thank you
thank
so much.
you.
So much
Phew,
for
you that asked for it. I didn't have to.
exactly.
You know,
Exactly. So
yeah,
that's
totally.
very empowering to I think that comes from being grounded. Is
Hmm.
I think that if you're grounded in what you need and you feel and you ask from a place of groundedness too. One of my big victories this week is that the old guy that's painting my house was like, he's like, you're really different. He's like, I was
Oh,
like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, you're really like calm. And my crew really likes you. Like everyone just feels like you're really just mellow. And I'm
oh,
telling you right
nice.
now, like I have not been told that very often in my life. And
It's
that
not.
is not something I've gotten from strangers often. Okay. Like in my past, I was
Oh,
really intense and like, that kind of vibe. But um I was so proud of that because at
I
some way I am carrying myself in a way now with in life that yeah, they're just all picking up like kind of surprisingly like, wow, you're just really calm and like chill and easy to work with. And I'm like, great. I'm doing something
nice.
different. That feels
Yes.
good. And I think that is just maybe just being really clear with them and communicating and feeling kind of grounded, even if I don't have it all figured out. But
But I
being
think that
grounded.
having a practice, but you have a practice, like,
Yeah.
and it's like, I think that the barrier to having a practice for me is feeling like I have to be perfect at it. And once I realized
Mm.
that my practice is going to be one, really unique because I don't live in a monastery, and two, is going to be, it just is what it is. So, like, once I gave myself permission to be like, it's a win if I take 3 deep breaths a day
That's
with
right.
intention, and it's like, if, right. And so it's like, or when I realized, I'm like, oh, weaving is meditation.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
walking, or like riding my bike is more than walking. I tend to like have so many thoughts, but like
Mhm.
somehow riding my bike is feels more like, but I guess what I'm saying is it looks different. Like I know, like I know you have the discipline of spending like whatever your discipline is, like you do
I
your
journal a
you
lot.
you
That's my.
journal a lot and you're with you take walks with your dog
Mhm,
every single day.
mhm.
Like I mean, that is a form of being present. That's being in
Yep.
the present moment. And so it's like then when things start getting, I don't know, you can feel it. I think it's you've yeah, sorry.
Take
You are
care.
calmer. Like there is a
I am
calm
calmer. I am.
core.
Yeah.
There is a calmer core because
Yeah.
you're not like when we were younger, I think both of us were like really putting on a big production
Yeah.
for the world. Like not like being fakey, like super sincere, super hardworking,
Yep.
and also maybe not as grounded as we could have been.
Yeah, for sure. And also for me, I know I am really clearly aware of the wounds that were driving some of that action. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't bad action. Like that's the thing is we have to understand those actions were cool and beneficial and I like them, but I have healed some pretty big I don't matter wounds in my
Hmm.
process. And I don't I mean, I'm sure it's in there somewhere, but like it's not running the show anymore. Like I'm cognizant of what I've been what the invisible stuff that I was kind of like projecting around and from, and I've kind of gone back in and healed some of that stuff and worked on it and cleaned it up a little bit. And I think that's why when a random old painter guy is like, "Wow, you're really calm." I'm like, "Hell yeah, Marty. Thank
Yes.
you for that." That's like one of the
Nice.
best compliments I've gotten in a long time because that's what I'm going for, like that's
Yes.
the vibe I've always wanted. I have this very clear memory of being a stressed out young farmer at the Cannon Beach Farmers Market and just being like, so, just like having one of those days where like, oh my God, everything's going wrong. And just like, I show up and it's like, whatever. It's a crazy market day. And this woman, like, I don't even know who she was. She walked up to the booth and her vibe, like, I've never forgotten it, was so calm, like just so incredibly confident and calm. And I don't know what she bought or what but I just remember being struck by it. Like,
Nice.
wow, like that is not me. Like it was it was almost the polar opposite of how I was feeling in the moment. And it was so like unobtainable to me at that moment. Like I could see it. I could see how powerful it was, what she was holding in her body. Totally somatic. Like I said, there was nothing verbal about it. It was just like how she comported herself. And I was like, damn, I want that. I really want that.
Mm.
And it's maybe taken me 20 years. And I feel like I'm starting to get little glimpses of maybe having that, which is really cool. But I do think some of that is what we've been talking about today is calling your power back to you, dropping into the moment, not letting yourself spend weeks and weeks and weeks to be chasing, being
And
looped in the
getting
thoughts.
honest with yourself about what you need.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
like I am able to relax this week because I cleaned my studio in May for
Yeah.
the open studio. So like
Yeah.
I do have stuff to put away, blah blah blah, but like not a stress. There's not stress about getting ready for Saturday.
Yeah.
And that's getting clear about what you need, and
And accepting reality
and
for the other
accepting reality,
that there's
not
only
like
so many hours, there's only so
right.
much of you. And I was fighting with reality most of my life. And I thought
Yes,
that was
yes.
cool. Like I thought I was a super cool for
I'm
doing that.
making the impossible
Yep,
happen. And I
exactly. Yep.
regularly made the impossible
Watch
happen.
me hold my beer, watch me do it when nobody else can. I was very proud of it. And
But there is a
I no
cost.
longer take pride in that because that was always myself setting myself up for these horrible, stressful situations. I was never valuing my
Mhm.
future self's like calmness and time and groundedness. I was always just setting her up for like, oh my God, like I have 50 million businesses now. What am I, these days would crash in on me that I was just trying to do way too much.
Yes.
And I would get through and I'd have this dopamine boost. I'd be like, look at me, I'm amazing. But that high gets old. There's a better high to be had, youngins. And the better high to have is the high five you give your past self for setting aside 3 sacred grounding days after you go to a festival. That's the flex that I want.
Nice.
right
Nice.
now. It's a big flex,
Nice.
and it's not something that the culture champions, I will tell you. Like, they champion the other, but this one, this like knowing yourself and knowing your capacity and honoring it as sacred, no matter
Mhm.
what that is for you, and not, yeah, that's just like the biggest flex for me right now. And so
That is a beautiful summation of
thank you.
where we started. So,
Full circle. All right. I love you so much, Iris. That was
uh,
great. Keep on keeping on nurturing this beautiful, grounded, loving summer energy that we both
yeah,
rocking right now.
yeah.
All right.
So, yeah, open studio in Astoria next weekend. So if anybody wants to come up, and I'm not overdoing it. I don't have a bunch of stuff to sell, and it's kind of challenging to get up to our house. So
Oh,
if
wow.
you,
That's a hard
so if you
marketing push to get right there.
well, it's true. Like we're like, I'm not sure if this, because we're rebuilding the stairs to our yard, so people are gonna have to come up the ramp, the
But there might be a
grass.
Western tanager that
There,
sings
there
at some
could be a
point.
Western tanager, and if you saw my work,
And you might cry.
and you might cry. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be beautiful. And if
I mean, it's
anybody has,
wonderful.
I'm gonna put out that if anybody hasn't seen Iris's house or studio, it is a purely magical experience all on its own. Like, it is so cool to see this woman's super, super creative environment that she's created for herself. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and yeah, it generally speaking, I hear from participants in the open studio tour that they're really glad that they came. So, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to share it with people. But yeah, you just it's yeah, sometimes I do a bunch of demos, and I think right now, maybe I'll feel more rested by Saturday, but
You should just sit in your yard and be like, "Do you hear the tanager?" Just do that with people.
If we're lucky, the adolescent crows will come and
Just
yell
do
at us.
sacred
Yeah.
grounding with everyone. They'll love you for it.
I was thinking about doing the postcards. Anyway, all right, goodbye. I love
All right.
you.
Oh, bye. I love you too.